Let's start out with our motivation. And this very evening, we have the opportunity to be in contact with the Buddha's enlightened activities. Through his speech, he teaches the Dharma, and that Dharma has been passed down to us to this day, and so we have the fortune to listen to it this evening. So we shouldn't take this opportunity for granted. We don't know what kind of karma there is in our mind stream that could ripen at any moment and stop this fortune that we have. So it's important to take advantage of it, and also while we're taking advantage of it, to create the cause to hear more teachings, create the cause to be connected to the Dharma later on in this life and in future lives. So cause and effect is infallible, and if we have respect for how cause and effect function, then we can really engage in creating the causes for the kind of results we want, and in abandoning creating the causes for the kind of results we don't want. And so doing that involves learning what kind of causes bring what kind of results, and then learning how to work with our mind so that we're able to create the causes we want and not create the ones we don't want. And so one of the causes we do want is to be able to generate bodhicitta. So that depends on seeing the dukkha of living beings, especially the dukkha of pervasive conditioning, and also in seeing their kindness to us. And in that way, generating compassion, and then to actualize the aim of our compassion, knowing that we have to generate full wisdom. And the one who has the full wisdom that we want to generate to fulfill our compassionate aspiration is a Buddha. And so therefore, we generate the aspiration to become fully awakened Buddhas. So this ability to come in contact with the Buddha's enlightened activity is, it's dependent on the Buddha having the capacity to spontaneously and uninterruptedly emanate bodies and work for the benefit of sentient beings, but it also depends on our ability to be recipients. And so the Buddha did his work, or her work, all the different rebirths and whatever continuum of whatever Buddhas there were. And these various Buddhas became fully enlightened. But then, you know, whether they can benefit us and the extent to which they can benefit us depends on us. So in one sutra, they give this example, these 9 different similes, and then in the Sublime Continuum, Maitreya's text, he explains them quite well. And one of them is of clouds in the sky. So the clouds are of compassion, and this is in our verses for requesting teachings, you know, and the billowing clouds of compassion rain down the Dharma. Okay, so this is the same thing, that there's these billowing clouds, and then the rain that they come as the Dharma. So in India, in late spring, it's the really hot season, and it's before monsoons, and everything's scorched, and you're burning. So at that time, if there's no clouds in the sky and no sign of rain, human beings are very unhappy. Peacocks and other birds who don't fly in the sky, they're kind of neutral. They don't care one way or another whether there's clouds. And hungry ghosts, they quite like that there's no clouds, because they suffer a lot in the rain. So here are 3 living beings in the same, 3 types of living beings in the same situation. One is unhappy, one is neutral, and one is happy. And then similarly, when the monsoon rains start, the human beings are delighted, the peacocks are still neutral, and the hungry ghosts now are unhappy. So that's the simile, and what it illustrates is that from the cloud of the Buddha's compassion, all these teachings and all the Buddha's activities rain down, not because the Buddha has an intention or he planned it out, but because all the causes have been created before, and so all of this happens naturally and continuously, uninterruptedly. The Buddha is raining down the Dharma. Okay? Like the monsoon rains. But not everybody responds in the same way. So the people who have faith and devotion for the Mahayana teachings, then when the rain falls, the rain of the Dharma falls, they're so happy, just like the farmers in the human realm are happy when the monsoon rain falls. The people who aren't interested in the Dharma one way or the other, they're like the peacocks. The rains come, peacocks say, this way, that way, doesn't matter to me. And then there's some people who are hostile to the Dharma teachings. They may have very strong wrong views, believing in inherent existence, or believing in a soul, or not believing in karma, not believing in the possibility of enlightenment. All sorts of wrong views. They may be really overwhelmed with their own afflictions. And they're like the hungry ghosts who, are miserable in the rain. And so these people, if they're exposed to the teachings, they just become hostile, they generate very negative minds, they just want to get away, and they criticize, and they're unhappy with the teacher and the teaching and the situation. And so I find this simile very interesting, because it really shows, from the Buddhist side, this enlightening activity is coming our way all the time. And, how we respond, whether we're like the human beings or the peacocks or the hungry ghosts, completely depends on our karma. And our karma depends on our mental intention. What kind of intentions we have, what kind of mental factors we allow in our minds. So, of course, all sorts of mental factors arise, and when the ones that we know, are unhealthy and don't correspond to reality arise, rather than let them play around in there, then we should remember the harm that they create, and that they could really separate us from the teachings in this life or in future lives, and make us be the kind of people who are hostile and dissatisfied and critical, or the people who were neutral and couldn't care one way or another. Yeah? And when you think of the lives of people who have either of those attitudes, yeah, even though they may live in wealth and prosperity this lifetime, what are their future lives going to be like? Because if they don't learn about karma, if they don't want to, follow karma, if they don't learn about how to work with their mind and just let their mind do any old thing, then what kind of rebirth will they wind up with? And do we want to join them in the kind of rebirth they wind up with? Okay? So, this simile, I think, has many meanings. One is, to rejoice in the fortune we have now. Another is to think of, creating the cause to continue that fortune, and how important it is to do that and not take the situation for granted. And then third is to think of practicing the path to become a fully awakened Buddha. And wouldn't it be wonderful if from our side we could rain the Dharma down on everybody all the time, no matter how they responded? Some people may praise us, some people may criticize us, some people may fall asleep. It has nothing to do with you, and everything to do with their mental receptivity, which is in accord with, what has gone on in their mind. So just to think of becoming a Buddha who does this very spontaneously, without any effort, without exhaustion, and it's like the Buddha's throwing all these seeds of the Dharma, and some of them land on very fertile ground and will grow into beautiful parks, and others land on concrete and won't grow at all. Yeah? But just to be able to do that, and for the benefit of living beings. To be able to touch the ones who are receptive, who are really thirsty, who really need the Dharma and want the Dharma. Okay, so I think there's many things to learn from the analogy. So today there's several questions that came, so that means that people have actually been looking over their notes. So again, just to remind you, if you don't prepare and if you don't read ahead, don't come. Okay, so I'll just start with the top of the pile of questions here. So the first one was about a transcript that Venerable Tarpa was working on for SAFE. And she said here, she wants to check a point. All phenomena of samsara and nirvana are empty because they're dependent arising. Okay? Some of the non-Buddhist tenet schools don't understand, and it's written incorrectly here, okay? What they don't understand is that if something is a dependent arising, then it must be empty.
Actually, in your point, you explained that for some of the lower Buddhist schools, but for this point, you explained that they believe in a creator God, so they don't believe that. They don't believe that
they don't believe that things are dependent arising, except.
The point that you made about them was they believe in a creator God, so they see that.
Oh, I see.
Actually, it works.
Oh, okay. So to say, okay, I thought you were talking about the privation. If you're saying all phenomena and samsara and nirvana are dependent arising. That's called the presence of the reason in the subject. Sometimes it's called agreement, or there's several different terms, but kind of the presence of the subject in the reason. It's long, but that's what it's called. Okay. So then I made a little diagram. I made two little diagrams, one like this, and then one with arrows and things, in the hopes that maybe somebody can fix it up and make it, put it into the computer and make it look better. Okay, but I use the syllogism, the self is impermanent because it's a product of causes. Okay, so just to review, the self is impermanent because it's a product of causes. What's the subject?
The self.
What's the predicate? Is impermanent. What's the reason? Because it's a product of causes. What's the thesis?
The self is impermanent.
The self is impermanent. Okay. So what is the presence of the reason in the subject?
The self is a product of causes.
The self is the product of causes. And what's the pervasion?
If the self is a product of causes, then it must be impermanent.
Yeah, no, not the self. Whatever is a product of causes is impermanent. Or if it's a product of causes, it's impermanent. That's the pervasion. What's the counter pervasion?
If it's impermanent, it's a product of causes.
No.
If it's not, it's not.
If it's not impermanent, it's not a product of causes. Okay. So good. So you know the parts of it, and you can see, oh yeah, I know the parts, and yeah, they all make sense. Does it move you at all?
That particular one?
Right now, do you feel moved? No. Okay.
It's
Somebody drops off.
Oh.
Yeah,
Does that mean that nobody else is on?
They were on and they went off.
Oh, okay. So, okay, so the reason it doesn't move us right now is because we're not thinking about it deeply. We know the different points, we can say them, but we're not really thinking deeply about the meaning of them. And so, are we having an inference? No. What are we having?
correct assumption.
A correct assumption. Maybe. You know, we may have doubt.
Yeah.
We may also have doubt. You know, is the self a product of causes? Well, I always thought I had a permanent soul. That's what I was taught when I was little. So what do you mean? Or not that the self is a product of causes. No, it's not. I have a soul that's permanent, that God created.
Wrong consciousness.
Yeah, that's a wrong consciousness. Okay? So, again, you can see that different people are going to react to the syllogism in very different ways, according to the level of their mind. Okay, so that, does anybody want to fix this up somehow? Okay. Okay, so one down. Then Ruby, the cartoonist, she said, I had a holy vision. The Dharmakaya manifested as a jar of jam, then as a jar of Nutella, and it taught me low rig. However, without strong samadhi, I'm not sure if I understood all of the teaching. So could you please have a look at the illustration and let me know if there are errors. Okay, so we won't even talk about Nutella, which people is horribly bad for you. It has all sorts of palm oil stuff in it. It's dreadful for your health. Yes. Now, what kind of mind is that that says no? It's a wrong consciousness. And what kind of mental factor is making it a wrong consciousness? Attachment. Okay, so in her drawing, she has the jar of jam, which is the observed object condition. She has the eye. Oh, there's something on the back. I didn't even notice that. I wonder which side I was looking at. Well, anyway. I didn't see it. We'll start with this. Does it matter which side we start with?
It should start with the jam. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The first side,
Yeah, here's the jam.
But I realized there are a whole bunch of errors anyway after reading The Nature of the Mind and Independent Buddhism.
Yeah, okay. So there's the jam, which is the observed object condition, somebody's eye, which is the uncommon empowering condition, and a previous moment of mind, which can be any mind. It doesn't have to be a visual consciousness. Okay, well, Jeffrey said, visual consciousness or mental consciousness, but he couldn't give me a reason on Tuesday. So I really have doubt, because I think perhaps just the fact of there being, clear and knowing of whatever consciousness before. Anyway, so some immediately preceding condition of consciousness. Okay, so the focal object is the jar of jam. Okay, and then what's the appearing? Well, this is a mistaken non-conceptual consciousness. Actually, it's an erroneous non-conceptual consciousness, because she's seeing the jar of jam as a jar of Nutella.
That was too so clear. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So what's appearing, is a jar of jam is appearing as a jar of Nutella to the eye consciousness. Mm-hmm. What the mind is apprehending is the jar of Nutella, which is actually, okay. So that is going to be an erroneous consciousness, a wrong consciousness, because it's not the apprehended object is not correct. Okay. Then there's different omnipresent mental factors also with this visual consciousness. So you have the intention that's directing your mind there, the attention that is, maybe going to start to see it as permanent or impermanent, or, something like that, or pleasant, the nature of suffering or the nature of happiness, something like that. Okay? Then you have the mental factor of discrimination that's able to tell a jar of Nutella from a jar of jam. Okay? And then you have a feeling, and I think on the first moment, I don't think you're going to have this perception. You're going to have much of a feeling. It's going to take a little while, And so maybe, the feeling from looking at the jar of Nutella, I don't think you're going to have a especially strong feeling from looking at the jar, because that's we're talking about the visual consciousness. Okay. Then you're going to have this very short moment of a mental direct perceiver. Then the conceptual consciousness is going to come in. Okay, and I think with that conceptual consciousness, because you've had some time now, and it's like, this is Nutella, this is really it, then pleasant feeling is going to arise with the expectation that you're going to have this, and that at that point, then your attention, will become inappropriate attention. This object is the cause of everlasting happiness. And then your intention will be, I'm going to go over there and get some right now. And then you're also going to have the mental factor of attachment come in. Yeah. That is saying, oh, this is really it, because you have this pleasant feeling, but then it's like, oh, I've got to really make sure I get it, and, I'm going over there, and I've got to get it before anybody else gets to it. Okay? So that all is conceptual consciousness. Yeah. You're not going to have all that attachment and inappropriate attention with the sense consciousness. That's all conceptual consciousness. But you can see that based on the wrong consciousness that mistook a jar of jam for a jar of Nutella, and then based on not caring at all about your health, then
there's a little article in a recent Time magazine I will find and cut out and give it to Ruth.
okay.
But if you were already thinking about it, because breakfast was on the way, then your mind is already colored with attachment before you even start, and then you have the direct perception of that jar of jam, which maybe is why you have it.
You mistake it as Nutella, yeah.
Then the feeling could arise more quickly. That's what I'm kind of looking at, is where the feeling starts to...
Yeah. Well, I think just looking at the jar itself, is not going to give you a whole lot. It's when you start saying, oh, it's Nutella, and I remember it tasted like this, and it's so good, and it's going to make me feel good, and I want it, and, So all that conceptualization is going to depend on the pleasant feeling. Yeah, but the pleasant feeling, I think, is going to start out small. Then you're going to get conceptualization, which will have its own feeling component, and a lot of that will start feeling good. The feeling will get better as you start anticipating what it's going to taste like. And then when you see somebody else in the community come and take it, then, the mental factor of anger is going to arise. There's going to be an unpleasant feeling in the mental factor of anger. And then when your visual consciousness realizes it wasn't Nutella at all, then you're going to have a correct visual consciousness that sees the jar of jam as a jar of jam. And you're probably going to feel quite disappointed. You'll have an unhappy, and then in the conceptual mind, you'll have an unhappy feeling, and then a feeling of disappointment, or maybe anger, like, why don't they buy Nutella anyway? Or, why doesn't somebody donate it? So that could happen. Okay? Then she has, the non-erroneous, non-conceptual consciousness of a sense-direct perceiver, a visual consciousness apprehending a jar of jam. So the focal object is jar of jam. The appearing object, the apprehended object. Okay. Then, and then you're going to move after that into conceptualization. So if you're her, what kind of feeling are you going to have? Unpleasant feeling, which will bring what kind of mental factors joining? Irritation, disappointment, anger, whatever it is. Okay? And then she also noted that together with whenever we have like a form appearing, together with the form, its impermanence appears, its being a product appears, but all of those things appear, but they are not the appearing object of that consciousness, and they're not the apprehended object, because they're not being apprehended by that visual consciousness, because only a yogic direct perceiver is going to be able to apprehend, for example, impermanence, the subtle impermanence of it. Now, the side I didn't see. Oh, yes?
Can you explain that a little more? If everything that appears to a consciousness of a sentient being appears as truly existing.
No, we're not that's
Yeah.
Prasangika school.
Okay.
We're talking Satantrika right now. Okay? So just Satantrika. We can talk Prasangika in a minute, but right now we're talking Satantrika. Okay? Then she had here another wrong conceptual visual consciousness of a visual consciousness apprehending one jar of Nutella as 2 jars of Nutella. She doesn't see 2 moons. She sees 2 jars of Nutella. Okay, so the focal object is Nutella. Okay, the appearing object, 2 jars, or actually 1 jar appearing as 2 jars. Okay, and your apprehended object, 2 jars, or again one object, 1 jar appearing as 2 jars. Okay, what kind of and so again, just with that, you're able to identify the object. You may have some small pleasant feeling, but then your moment of mental consciousness, mental direct perceiver. And then conceptual consciousness with what kind of feeling?
Jackpot!
What?
Pleasant jackpot!
If it were me, I would feel an unpleasant feeling. I can't stand this stuff. Yeah, it's like, oh, Nutella, why can't we have something good? Okay, then she asked for the discrimination is, actually you said now, jackpot. That's not actually the discrimination. The discrimination is the, actually, by that time, hopefully you've realized it's only 1 jar of Nutella. Unless you're really delusional. Okay. And then attachment is arising, and, the intention again of, well, this time of like, oh, good, now I can eat a whole lot, And maybe if somebody else gets there before me, it's okay, because there's 2 jars. Yeah. Okay. Do we need to go through the other one, or did we pretty much cover everything?
It is a conceptual consciousness.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, wrong conceptual consciousness. A conceptual consciousness apprehending an inherently existent, pleasurable jar of Nutella. Okay, so let's do it now according to Prasangika. So then, what is your appearing object to the visual consciousness?
A jar of Nutella.
Well, which one?
A truly existent jar of jam appearing as a truly existent jar of Nutella. Okay? So, yeah. Okay, so this is still going to be a wrong consciousness, just like the other one. Now let's say there's a jar of jam appearing as, according to Prasangika. Your focal object is a jar of jam. To your visual consciousness, what is your appearing object?
Charge.
Appearing object is a jar of jam, appearing as Nutella.
existent.
Now we're just talking about in a visual consciousness correctly apprehending the jar of jam. What's your appearing object?
Jar of jam.
A truly existent jar of jam.
A truly existent jar of jam. So that appearing object is mistaken.
Okay.
Okay? So you're mistaken with respect to the appearing object. Now, you see a truly existent, let's say it's me, I see the truly existent jar of jam. I'm not, jam's okay, you know, I don't get a big buzz out of it. So my apprehended object, visual consciousness, is going to be what?
A truly existent jar of jam.
What's a direct perceiver sense?
But you're not grasping at it, but you're still perceiving it as true.
Apprehended object is
A jar of jam.
A jar of jam. The apprehended object is the jar of jam. Okay. Now let's take my conceptual, let's say instead of it being jam, it is chocolate chip cookies. Okay? And let's do it as a conceptual consciousness. So focal object,
the conceptual appearance of a chocolate chip cookie.
focal object, chocolate chip cookies. Appearing object, truly existent chocolate chip cookies. Apprehended object,
Conceptual appearance.
Chocolate chip cookie.
Oh, you're just seeing them, sorry.
no, it's conceptual consciousness. Conceptual consciousness.
What were we asking over there?
Actually, we should go back to the appearing object. We're doing conceptual consciousness of me regarding chocolate chip cookies.
So you're just thinking about them,
Yeah, so I'm thinking about them. I'm not seeing them.
not seeing them. Yeah.
Okay, I'm thinking about them. Focal object is chocolate chip cookies. Yeah. Appearing object?
Conceptual appearance of a truly existent.
Conceptual appearance of truly existent chocolate chip cookies. Apprehended object.
Conceptual
Appearance of
No, chocolate chip cookies.
truly existent, delicious chocolate chip cookies.
Truly existent.
Truly delicious.
Yes. Yeah. Chocolate chip cookies. Okay. So, is that consciousness, is it correct regarding its appearing object?
The question again?
That consciousness, my conceptual consciousness, that's grasping at the true existence of the chocolate chip cookies.
That's mistaken.
It's mistaken with regard to the appearing object. Why?
Because they aren't truly existent.
Because they're appearing truly existent, but they aren't. And what about with respect to the apprehended object?
Well, that's correct, because they are chocolate chip cookies.
You said they were truly existent.
She said
Truly
they're
existently delicious chocolate chip cookies.
They're delicious chocolate chip cookies, and delicious is a erroneous.
No, they're I'm apprehending truly existent chocolate chip cookies.
So you're grasping at them.
So I'm grasping at them. So
That's also erroneous.
that's erroneous. Okay? So it's mistaken with respect to the appearing object and erroneous with respect to the apprehended object. Now why, when it was just the visual perception of the chocolate chip cookies, it was still mistaken with respect to the appearing object. Why wasn't it erroneous with respect to the apprehended object?
Because you weren't assenting to the appearance.
Because grasping at true existence does not accompany sense perceptions. So, Because remember, grasping at truly existence, if you read in Meditation on Emptiness, he translates it as the conception of true existence. Yeah, it's a conceptual consciousness. So the visual consciousness itself does not grasp at true existence.
It just appears.
It appears that way. And that's why when you negate true existence in meditative equipoise and have a direct perceiver, when you come out of your meditative equipoise, you still have the appearance of true existence to your sense consciousnesses. Okay? And you're starting to wear away at any grasping at true existence, because with your conceptual consciousnesses, you're knowing that that appearance of true existence is false. Okay, so that's prasangika.
So can we review one part there? Because I don't think we've done this before. This analysis of the visual, of the sense direct perceivers and the part with the truly existent.
Yeah.
This is new.
Yeah. With the sense direct perceiver, everything that appears to sentient beings' consciousnesses except meditative equipoise directly perceiving emptiness is a mistaken appearance, because whatever is appearing truly existent.
That's for the appearing object.
That's for the appearing object.
Apprehended object.
But the apprehended object
Of the sense.
of the sense is not grasping at that true existence. There's the true existence.
Seeing true existence.
The true existence is appearing, but the visual consciousness does not grasp it as truly
So then
existent.
why would you say, when we went through this exercise, then why would you say, when the question is, what is the apprehended object of, I can't remember what the example was, the jam or whatever, by the visual consciousness, why would you say it truly exists?
You wouldn't. You would just say
Just,
the jam.
because that isn't what we said, I don't believe.
No, it was.
Oh, it was.
Yeah. Well, that's what some other people in the audience said, but that wasn't.
The answer to that question for the visual
It's just the apprehended object is the jam or whatever. And that's how it's done, so that you can still say that that sense consciousnesses are reliable, even though they're mistaken. Okay?
thank you.
Yeah, because otherwise you would have to say every consciousness we have is erroneous, but it's not, because you're able to identify the object correctly, even though it's appearing as truly existent. And so for Tsongkhapa, that's good enough to say that conventionally the object exists and the consciousness is a reliable consciousness.
So you could say then that in those two, the focal object and the apprehended object would be the same.
The what?
The focal object and the apprehended object would be the same in that example.
In that example, yeah. Okay. But if you're grasping the thing as truly existent,
Now you're in conceptual.
then you're in conceptual mind. And then you're not only mistaken with respect to your appearing object, but you're erroneous with respect to your apprehended object. And so that consciousness is not a reliable cognizer, because it's grasping at the true existence of the object. Okay? So we actually have a lot of wrong cognizers during the day, according to prasangikas. Because every time, there's attachment in our mind or anger in our mind, it's not a reliable cognizer. Okay, let's get back to Satantrika. I'm just doing the questions now. I haven't even gotten to the talk yet. Okay, so Venerable Chuni had some things. You were teaching on sensory direct perceivers and noted that we can have more than one sensory direct perceiver that is a prime cognizer at the same time, but they have to be different senses. Yeah, because Dharmakirti or somebody said you could have only one kind of a consciousness at a time. Okay. Okay, then you noted that each of those consciousnesses has its own object and its own set of omnipresent mental factors. Okay, that was startling, although obvious. So I think that means we can have 5 or 6 feelings arise at once, each induced by contact with a different object. Okay? And that's true, but you're not going to be having, first of all, if they're prime cognizers, according to Sautrantika, that's just the first moment. So the first moment, you're not going to have a really strong feeling one way or the other. I think you have to have a series of moments before a feeling builds up about the object. And also, you're not going to be having prime cognizers of all those objects simultaneously, because your mind can't, realize all those objects simultaneously. So some of those are probably going to be inattentive perceivers. Okay? But when you're doing mindfulness of feelings, you're going to focus on whatever feeling from whatever consciousness is most evident to you at a particular time. Yeah. Okay. And also be aware too of what are feelings associated with sense direct perceivers and what are feelings associated with conceptual consciousnesses. And really learn to tell the difference in your own mind. It's very, very interesting. Yeah?
The conceptual mind exaggerates almost every sense feeling coming from the senses.
Yeah.
Immediate.
Yeah, the conceptual mind just exaggerates the feeling. Yeah, immediately. Yeah, because you can see it, like if somebody says something that you don't like, your ear consciousness is hearing the sound. Yeah, and if it's too loud or something like that, there may be an unpleasant feeling. But just regarding the sound, whatever. It's when your conceptual consciousness starts giving meaning to those sounds and then saying, oh, and they said this, and then that's because they really are getting to me because of that, because they don't like me and they're trying to do this. And we start mind reading and projecting, motivations on the person and this and that. And then we get angry, and all of that is conceptual consciousness. None of it is a reliable consciousness. And the feeling component to it is way, way exaggerated. Yeah, way exaggerated. So, this is really something that, if we pay attention, should stop us in our tracks when we start to get irritated and bugged about something. Yeah.
Seems like an angry mind or a grumpy mind or anything like that is always unpleasant.
Yeah.
But we don't really notice most of that.
Yeah. And actually, in Theravada, I don't know if Asanga says this too, but in the Theravada and Abhidharma, or Pali Abhidharma, it says if you have an unpleasant feeling, there's going to be some level of anger accompanying it, which is really scary. Yeah, to see how unpleasant feeling, wham, goes into anger, wham, goes into creating negative karma. Yeah.
And discouraging, I find, is to see how gross the feeling has to be for me to actually get it. Like it's already in trouble.
Yeah, that for us to even notice, let's say that we're angry.
Or that there's the unhappy,
that there's an unhappy feeling.
There's already got enough momentum to have anger with it.
Yeah.
it's so gross. We
Yeah.
get it.
Right. Which is one reason why it's good, like, just to be sensitive to our moods, you know. And if we're in a bad mood, just, you know, go, okay, there's an unpleasant mental feeling here, but boy, you know, there might be some small degree of anger at the unpleasant mental feeling, but if I'm not careful, it's going to grow by, you know, whether I see jam or Nutella, or somebody says with a big smile, hello, or somebody frowns at me, almost anything anybody does is going to enhance my grumpy mood, you know, by making my unpleasant mental feeling worse, because I'm already, you know, I'm grumpy and I'm not mindful, and yeah.
But equally so, the grumpiness is the cause of the unpleasant feeling.
Well, it starts out with the unpleasant feeling, which leads to the grumpiness, and then the grumpiness sets you up for much more unpleasant feeling.
But the grumpiness is unpleasant.
Yeah, it itself, it is unpleasant.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
I mean, it sets you up also, but the fact
It itself is unpleasant. Yeah, and then it sets you up for what happens next, which is you're liable to interpret anything else. You know, anything else that comes in your purview is liable to evoke an unpleasant feeling, just because the grumpiness is so well placed. Yeah.
We should regard that immediately as a 911 moment.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. That's a 911 moment. Yeah. Yeah. So even, you know, they don't have the word mood, you know, when they talk about mind and mental factors, there's not some word mood, you know, but I think it's something that really to be very mindful of in our lives, what our moods are. Yeah, because with the mood there's already some mental factor operating, and we could be in a pleasant mood, you know, kind of open and receptive and everything, or we could be in a bad mood. Yeah, so, or we could have the mood could be pleasant, but in the sense of anticipating something with attachment. Yeah. Like, oh, maybe we're going to have pancakes for breakfast. Oh, Kevin's not here. Oh, Venerable, I saw the recipe on Venerable Jigme's computer. Maybe. Huh?
Well, you get them even if we have.
Yeah, yeah. Then, oh, I heard you had pancakes for breakfast. Oh, I rejoice. I share in the happiness of other sentient beings. Yes.
What do you think in this, what we were just speaking of right here, that the impact of the need would be?
Impact of the needs.
Yeah.
Like, give me an example.
Well, like we were just talking about being in a bad mood.
Okay.
And it seems to me, in my experience, that a lot of behavior is driven by unmet needs, but oftentimes they're needs I'm not aware of.
Yeah. So a lot of behavior is driven by unmet needs, but a lot of times it's needs that you're not aware of. I should take this opportunity. When I was writing the book with Russell about compassion, and I said that, you know, that you know, kind of need, you know, that we should be aware of our feelings and needs, and, you know, and things like that. And he was very strong, saying not all needs are legitimate. You know, Marshall is very, like, all your needs he doesn't discriminate between legitimate or not legitimate. He says if it's important to that person, then it's important. Russell doesn't take it that way. He says a lot of people may misinterpret situations and have needs in a situation that have nothing to do with it. Yeah, or their needs may be really unrealistic. Yeah, driven by unrealistic expectations. So I had to cross part of what I wrote out. Okay.
Two definitions of the same word, too.
Yeah. But also they could be using the word differently.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know. But but one of my feelings, when I look at NVC, is that I notice within myself, some of the needs I have are very infused with attachment. Yeah.
And self-centered thought.
And self-centered thought. Right.
That's what gets me
What?
Almost all of them.
Yeah. Well, a good number of them are, and since he doesn't discriminate between attachment and self-centeredness, he just says all these needs are valid. And you could discern it in two ways. One is just saying, if you're an ordinary being, you have these needs, nothing spectacular. Ordinary beings have these. But then if you're saying, like, let's say you have a need for companionship. Your feeling is loneliness, and you need companionship. For ordinary beings, very normal. Very normal. Yeah? For ordinary Dharma practitioners, very normal. For a bodhisattva, a high-level bodhisattva, probably not. They could be content in their meditative equipoise for a long time without, caring whether a friend calls them or doesn't call them.
So my question about this is I guess that I've been thinking for the last couple of days that from reading the root text that, especially the one on the correct assumers, that and the debated point in there, it sounds like all of our functionings of the mind fall into these 7 categories. And so...
Not all of them.
Okay.
Well, or I should say there's a debate.
Okay, so,
yeah.
So if they do, that wasn't clear to me, if they do or don't, but if they do, then in this, I'm trying to kind of see how these two relate to each other. So we were just talking about moods, and we were analyzing it somewhat in this 7 terminologies and this and that. So where would these needs happen? Because they're not always, I wouldn't know if I would call them inattentive, because I haven't really thought about them. I actually haven't known they've been driving my behavior.
Right, yeah. So a lot of those needs, there's different ways when you study low rig. A lot of those needs I would put much more in when we study mental factors, or maybe some of the needs, here I'm just talking off the top of my head, that maybe some of those needs I would describe as objects of conceptual consciousness. Yeah, that the mind is thinking about this, that, or the other thing. And so it may not be one of the 7, but it could be an object of a conceptual consciousness.
I'll give you an example today of something I realized that I was thinking about my behaviors, and I've gone up and I think maybe disturbed Venerable Sampton 2 or 3 times in the 2:30 session, once each day. I've just gone and kind of without much self-control or thought, not really kind of, I don't know what you would call it, not much mindfulness, just kind of working, doing my thing, and I've said something to her, and each time I thought, oh, I wish I hadn't done that, because we're in silence, and she's trying to work, and she's trying to enjoy the retreat, and I realized that in my behavior sometimes this can come up. And now that we've been doing the NVC for a few years, I realize there's an unmet need there. And when I recognize that, then I can stop the behavior, because I have the mindfulness of what's kind of going on.
What was the unmet need?
I just was wanting to connect. She'd been home. Her father had died. I hadn't really had a chance to really talk with her about this. at all, and I just had this feeling inside. I realized, oh, I'm just trying to connect here. But I wasn't really aware of it till 3 days went by, and I think I've done this 3 days in a row. One question to you each time that I realized from my side was kind of like on the impulsive level.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, a lot of my impulsivity, I think, comes from these unmet needs.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's unrecognized.
Yeah.
And so it's hard. I'm interested in how these fit together, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
because it seems like what we're. I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out what I'm doing all day long. How to look at it in light of the understanding of these.
Right. And the thing is that there's so many different paradigms to use to look at our behavior and our mind, and there's not going to always be one-to-one matches in all of these things. Yeah. So there could have been going on in your mind a thought of, oh, there's my friend and she's back and I wonder how she is. And then not being aware of that conceptual consciousness. Yeah,
That's why I'm wondering,
then acting on it.
Inattentive of your own.
Oh yeah, we're inattentive of a lot of the stuff we're thinking.
Yeah.
Oh, so much.
Which is why when you start meditating, all that stuff just becomes so.
Right. Yeah.
I want to label all these things.
Yeah.
For me, I'm finally getting what these words are referring to a little bit. To now look in my experience.
Yeah, right. And so I think that's a good point that you mentioned, that lots of times things that have been inattentive, when we sit down to meditate, all of a sudden it's like, oh, that thought's been going on,
Glaring speakers in your ears.
Yeah.
You distracted yourself from.
Right. Right. Mm-hmm.
Jonathan is asking, could certain needs be a type of implicative negation?
A certain type of
Implicative negation.
Can certain needs be a kind of implicative negation?
Negations, right? The same as affirmative.
Yeah, that's like. Give me an example. Yeah, John, give me an example. He should be listening to this.
It's not this, it's this.
Well, I'm wondering, because I think of needs myself as more the way I define what I can use to get through something. It's not, when I think about the needs, I don't think of them as an actual something floating around inside of my consciousness or my being, that there's an actual thing that is lacking this, it seems to me much more a way I define the stepping stone that I use to move beyond. I think of it much more flexible. I don't know if that might be where it's going with the negation.
Yeah.
Because I don't think of it as an actual thing. Like I think of like the needs being, because they're always changing anyway. They're never. And like when I feel lonely, it's not that I actually need a person. Even though I might bring a friend around me in order to not feel lonely anymore. But there's all kinds of ways to get through loneliness.
Right.
There's lots of different ways to feel that sense of loneliness. So the need is sort of a way of affirming the thought that's the painful thought or the correct thought.
By saying that you need companionship, it's affirming the loneliness.
In the affirmative sense rather than in the what I'm lacking. I don't know. That's how it comes to my mind. I think I've always... That's why I've never liked this term need. I don't think it's... For my mind, it's not suitable in the way I look at it.
Because you're saying that by saying that you have a need, it's making the feeling... This is an NVC language of feeling. It's making the feeling more concrete.
Yeah, actually. And instead, I would like to recognize the feeling and recognize what I need to do, or what I can do that's beneficial, without, reifying it.
Yeah.
Without solidifying it into one thing. Because it's always shifting. Sometimes I need a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And that's attachment, but it's also my recognition that in order to get through calming my mind, that is one thing that I can use. Otherwise, I can just lose it. Low blood sugar, I don't know.
Okay, next time he's like this, give him some peanut butter right in the open wide, John.
That's my question. What about when the physical makes your consciousness change? Like, we're seeing in the awareness that when your physical, it can make you feel sad, it can make you feel worried, it can make you feel angry.
Okay, so so a physical need, like you're hungry and then you're in a bad mood because you're hungry or something like that. Yeah, or you're sick.
You don't really care at that time.
Yeah. So again, we can look at the feeling, but then, and this is, I think, actually a good point, to look at what we think we need and ask ourselves if we really need that. Yeah, because sometimes, it's like, I feel restless and I need a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, or my stomach doesn't feel well, I need to lie down, and to ask ourselves sometimes, what other things could we, instead of saying, my stomach hurts, I need to lie down, say, my stomach hurts, I need to do something to alleviate it. And then give space.
For people who have...
Isn't that
right.
what you were saying a little bit?
No, but wait a minute. But if we say, I need to do something to alleviate it, then there's space. And one of the things we could do to alleviate it would be to think of all the people who also have stomach aches and have compassion for them.
Alleviate it, though. It's not necessarily alleviating it, it's using it beneficially.
Right. Yeah.
Transforming.
Yeah. Yeah. But what it's alleviating is the dislike.
Yeah,
the dislike for the stomach ache. Yeah.
The mental unpleasantness.
Right. Yeah, because you have the physical sensation of the stomach ache, then the mental unpleasantness. And that's where we get hooked a lot. And that's where Tonglen helps us deal with the mental unpleasantness.
I think that's where anxiety really gets you into trouble.
Yeah.
Learn those two, because you can then work with the mind and then help you get the body.
Yeah.
At least with muscle tension type things.
Right. Yeah, anxiety's from the mind.
Right.
Yeah.
That it ramps everything up and you don't think so clearly.
Right. Did he come up with an example?
He actually just used the same example of lack of companionship, and which implies a state of loneliness. So,
lack of companionship is that's not an implicative negative. That's just a negative.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a non-affirming one. You're not affirming anything.
Imply that.
It's just lack of companionship. Yeah, it's not implying anything.
Yeah, because you could be alone or not alone and still have that.
You could be what?
Because oftentimes I feel more lonely when I'm around people than when I'm alone.
Yeah.
So it doesn't imply that you're with people or not with people by saying that there's a lack of companionship.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. Very true. Okay, well, we'll save the main part of the talk for next week.
Questions next week?
Okay, I'll put it back in this pile. But go through and think of some examples and really work with, look at some of these needs things and see, are they conceptual consciousnesses? Are they direct perceivers? Do they have some tinge? How does the need relate to the feeling? When I have a certain feeling, can there be many needs involved? And can I pick the need? Yeah.
What's interesting about the needs to me, I just realized I haven't quite bought in with your thing completely, is because my experience is when you go through this I do it as on the cushion mostly. It usually takes me 3 rounds of analysis, and when I actually hit the actual need, the whole feeling tone changes.
Yeah.
Just like you described. So
Yeah.
the whole unpleasant feeling just kind of dissolves.
Right. Yeah, because you've been able to identify, you know, but see, what you've been able to identify is there's some conceptual consciousness going on saying, I need X.
Right. But you're not aware of
that you're not aware of. Yeah. And then, you know, if we're just looking at it from ordinary human beings, then all these needs, you know, most of them, you know, who depending, Russell wouldn't agree, but Marshall would say, by Marshall's things, they would be legitimate. Russell would say, but, you know, you may be misinterpreting the situation and having a need that doesn't, you know, that's really quite unrealistic.
But this is the important thing, I think, when we think about needs, if we're trying to look at it from Marshall's point of view. He's always saying the need is not something like specific and grasping, but it's a universal, ordinary beings kind of need, like we need water, like we need air, like we need love, like we need, without an expectation that any one person or any one thing will fulfill. That's where it gets to be so self-centered, when we are grasping at a certain way of fulfilling it.
Yeah, but even if you say, that it does get quite sticky when we're grasping in a certain way. But when we say, like, I'm lonely, I need companionship, if we're thinking companionship means other people, you know, then we're putting ourselves in a box.
And that's an incorrect way of thinking about the need. That's not how Marshall would think about
it. Right.
Or something.
Yeah. In other words, he would say also look at how maybe you can develop a sense of companionship in your own mind and learn.
Yeah, the only you can fill your own needs. That's
really his only you can.
No one else can fill your own needs.
That's what, like, say, like, hearing no, it's like a very big part of the NVC. How to hear
the what?
How to hear no with giraffe ears.
Yeah.
One of the biggest things of compassion, you know, when you say somebody to someone, and it's like they tell no in whatever way, and you were supposed to hear the no in a compassionate way, and then still be happy.
Right. Yeah.
So that's important.
Yeah, I think it's very important not to judge. Okay, but then I think we should also look deeper too and see what those needs are, and what kind of needs will be overcome at what levels of the path. Yeah, because some of those needs will be overcome at different levels of the path.
Because that companionship, I mean, like bodhicitta is the companionship.
Yes.
Everybody is with you.
Yes.
Everybody is with you.
Right.
Before you're still in love, and it's like, so that companion, you do have it, but it's now universal.
Right. So bodhicitta is your companionship. But often when we just say companionship, we think another person, you know, which is limiting.
Right.
Yeah. And that's why I think his way of saying, you know, what I need to deal with that feeling and keeping it somehow open and broad so that...
Well, I think that if you're, like, from the perspective of NDC, the way that we get our needs met is really destructive in our own lives. So understanding what they are gives us the ability to find different ways that are constructive of fulfilling those needs rather than the destructive way that we're habituated to fill those needs.
Right.
And that from his point of view, it's also about giving to others is how we get our needs met. So that has that I mean, that's not how we think about it when we think about our needs. That's what Marshall's trying to teach us to think. So it's different than just I need. Big time different.
Yeah, it's like the greatest thing is to contribute to life. That's the greatest need we all have. So we do that by giving. So
Yeah.
That's true.
Okay.